Hello, welcome to CIS 4510. To manage stakeholders, we need to define the meaning of project stakeholders, identify them for each project, and define their importance to the project. A plan should be created, then tools, techniques, and strategies will be used to manage stakeholders uh, and stakeholders' expectations. The expectations is one of the most important keys to project goals. In general, the project stakeholders are individuals, groups, or organizations who may affect or be affected by or receive themselves to be affected by decision, activity, or outcome of a project. Project stakeholders management are the group of processes used to control and manage stakeholders' expectations. But do we need to manage stakeholders? Because they are an important component of the project management framework? Yes, then we need to manage them. How to manage them? We are talking about people. So stakeholders are the people who request projects, approve projects, reject projects, support projects, and oppose projects. Most stakeholders are not aware of and don't care about their stakeholders or other stakeholders. Project managers and their teams must have a good dialogue and the appropriate communication channels with all stakeholders to balance their expectations and needs. Stakeholders could be internal and within the organization or could be external to the organization. An example of internal stakeholders: top management, functional managers, project sponsor, project team, support staff, and internal customers for the project. While an example of external stakeholders are competitors, suppliers, contractors, government groups and officials, and concerned citizens. To be more specific in internal and external stakeholders classification, you can look at the list for both that has been provided in this slide, and you can see that we can be more specific on who can be identified as internal, from project director, project manager, to program manager, to project manager's family, sponsor, customer, performing organization, other employees of the organization, labor unions, project team members, project management office, and governance board. For the external, the suppliers, the governmental regulatory agencies, competitors, potential customers with an interest in the project, groups representing consumer, environmental, or other interest, groups or individuals who are competing for limited resources, groups or individuals who are pursuing goals that conflict with those of the project. So all those are specifics, and you can add, it depends on the project. This is not set in stone. You can add internal and external based on the type of your project, based on the organization culture, and the different relation with the project. So where does stakeholders management fit in the project life cycle? And we looked at the project life cycle. We have the initiation, we have the planning, we have the execution, the closing, and monitoring and control will be the overall umbrella supervising all the way from the initiation to closing. Where does that stakeholders management fit? Looking at the different stakeholders' activities and processes, you can see that stakeholders management spreads in all phases. During the initiation, we need to identify stakeholders. Then in the planning phase, the project managers and the team will plan on how to manage stakeholders' expectations and requirements. During the execution, the team will be managing the communications with all stakeholders based on their level of development and importance, and then all communications and expectations will be monitored, and that's the bigger umbrella, to make sure that they are being executed as planned. So as we can see, the project stakeholders management is spreading all over the project life cycle and within the different phases. Going over each process, we start with the process of identifying all people or organizations impacted by project and documenting relevant information regarding their interest, involvement, and impact on project success. The inputs of this process will be the project charter, the procurement documents, enterprise environmental factors, the organizational process assets. The tools and techniques used to accomplish this process are stakeholders analysis, expert judgment, meetings, and other tools as needed. We can use software, we can use other products just to manage as part of the tools and techniques just to manage the meetings or to collect information about stakeholders and analyze it. The output will be a matrix that will list all stakeholders, their interest, their involvement, and their impact on the project. Once all stakeholders have been identified, a stakeholder analysis will be conducted. The stakeholders analysis is a technique of systematically gathering and analyzing quantitative and qualitative information to determine whose interests should be taken into account throughout the project. The analysis will provide the team with the potential impact or support each stakeholders could generate and classify them so as to define and or to identify an approach or a strategy to follow. Then an assessment of stakeholders' reactions to various situations will be documented. This slide shows the matrix that can be generated from identifying stakeholders and their impact on the project. Based on this matrix, a strategy to manage stakeholders will be developed. In that strategy, the team will define an approach to increase the support and minimize negative impacts of stakeholders. Stakeholders' information are too sensitive to be shared and should be kept within the project management team. Another matrix can be developed to represent the results of the stakeholders analysis. This slide shows an example of information collected about the involved stakeholders, their position, if they are external or internal, their project roles, and the contact information. One of the models that will be used in classifying stakeholders and analyzing them is called SALIENCE model, which is a method for classifying stakeholders and to decide who do matter for this project. A project manager is likely to face the challenge in choosing the right stakeholders and prioritizing the competing communication needs. Salience model brings clarity in prominence and importance of the different stakeholders. The stakeholder salience is decided by the assessment of their power, by the legitimacy, by the urgency, and by their participation or relation in the organization. For the power is the ability of stakeholders to impose their will. The urgency is the need for immediate action. The legitimacy is to assess if their involvement is appropriate. The model, which as we see interacts or relate all three together, lets the project manager decide the relative salience or salience of a given stakeholder, the degree to which managers give priority to competing stakeholders' claims be guided by how salient stakeholders are. The degree in this slide illustrates the model. Each of the circle maps stakeholders with power, urgency, and legitimacy, creating 7 different classes with the overlap of these circles and the outside circles or the outside areas. The stakeholders are assessed and assigned to one of these regions. As you can see, we have 7 of them. For number 1, which is the dormant stakeholders, they have power but not urgency or legitimacy. Thus, the manager should be aware of them, but there is no need to plan for their communication needs. The discretionary stakeholders, they are legitimate but have no power or urgency. Their communication needs maybe in to be in the form of actually asking for some details. They may not need much attention. The demanding stakeholders, they are with urgency and their needs have to be met when asked for. The dominant stakeholders, power and legitimacy overlap in this case. Dominant stakeholders have legitimacy and authority. Their communication needs must be taken into account. The dangerous stakeholders, these stakeholders have the dangerous mix of power and urgency. This combination of power and urgency makes them very useful for welfare of the project. Therefore, their needs must be met. The dependent stakeholders, they are legitimate and have the urgency but do not have equal power. Keep them informed as they could be of help when you need to leverage their strengths in navigation or navigating the organization complexities, but not in much need of communication. The number 7 is the definitive stakeholders, and those are the most important, or this is the most important area in this model. Where the power and legitimacy converge and gets combined with the ability to get urgency from the organization. The most critical category of stakeholders, which is always to be kept informed, satisfied, and involved. So number 7 is the most important area. And after that, we have the demanding, the dominant. We have to look at those different areas. And based on that, we can keep them informed, keep them communicated. Now remember that this model takes into consideration only those who have power, urgency, and legitimacy, eliminating those without any such attribute, reducing the noise in the system. So it's good that you can eliminate the non-stakeholders from the project and just keep the people that are related to the project in these circles. Salience model will be used to develop stakeholders management plan, which will include the strategies that will be used to engage stakeholders in project decisions and activities based on their needs, interests, and potential impact. The plan will include the following: the current and desired engagement levels, the interrelationships between stakeholders, the communication requirements, potential management strategies for each stakeholder, methods for updating the stakeholder management plan. The plan to manage stakeholders will not be part of the official project documents. In many cases, parts of the stakeholders management plan are not written down, and if they are distributed in strictly, or they are strictly limited with the distribution. And I said that before, that we don't include that in the document. This is not documented, and any documentation for that will be just between the team members, and none of the stakeholders will see this document. Analyzing project stakeholders could include a different classification based on their awareness of the project. The matrix in this slide actually shows the suggested classifications of these techniques using the unaware, the resistant, the neutral, the supportive, and the leading stakeholders. The unaware stakeholders are unaware of the project and its potential impact on them. The resistant, aware of the project yet resist to change. The neutral, aware of the project yet neither supportive or nor resistant. The supportive, aware of the project and support the change. leading are aware, they are aware of the project and its potential impact and actively engaged in helping the success of the project. To manage stakeholders engagement, we can refer to communication plan. And when we're looking at project communication planning or project communication management and other management, that does not mean that those pieces are standalone. All the pieces that we were talking about during or through over the course or the semester are interrelated with each other. So we need to go back, refer to the communication plan that has been developed and overlaps with the stakeholders management plan. And the idea is to work with project stakeholders to satisfy their needs and expectations, resolving issues and fostering engagement in project decisions and activities. The most important part is for project managers to understand and work with various stakeholders. They need to use various communications methods and their interpersonal and management skills and capabilities to engage stakeholders and make sure to capture their needs and their satisfaction. This matrix is an example of stakeholders analysis based on their engagement in the project. And again, as we can see, this is a different classification where we can see the power. We can see that the current engagement as leading, resistant, supportive, and neutral, and the potential management strategies used for each stakeholder or each person involved. This slide shows an example of a log for all project issues, their impact on the project, who reported the issue, the person who will be handling the issue, the due date, and the status of that issue. You can add comments as you need in that log. And again, this is not set stone. This is just an example or a template that's been used by some companies. Organizations does it differently, but in most cases, this is the general format for this kind of log. The log table, the charts, and the management techniques will assist in monitoring and controlling stakeholders throughout the project. As we stated, the stakeholders management is in all phases, including the monitoring and control. So the project manager will be monitoring stakeholders' relationships and adjusting plans and strategies for engaging stakeholders as needed. As a project manager, you cannot control stakeholders, but you can control their level of engagement. We are not controlling the people, but we are controlling their level of engagement within the project and managing their expectations. Key stakeholders should be invited to actively participate in the kickoff meeting rather than merely attending it. Software can also assist in project stakeholders management. We can use communication software like email, blogs, websites, text, and tweets. All that can aid in stakeholders communications. Make sure not to use, when you are using text or tweets, make sure not to use like a chat language. It needs to be professional, especially if you are dealing with, in a professional project and with professional stakeholders. You should not use the chat language, and you should avoid any typos. Collaboration tools like Google Docs, wikis, and virtual meeting software can also be promote stakeholders engagement and be used in monitoring and controlling projects stakeholders. That will be all for this session. If you have any questions or concerns, you can email, call, Skype, or come in person to my office, and I will be more than glad to assist. Thank you and have a great day.